Hello, I want to talk to you a little bit about accommodations. And first I want to start off by talking about accommodations for testing. Now basically when we're talking about accommodations, they fall into just a few types of categories. For example, time or scheduling of assessment. We could either give extended time, or we could allow a student to take part of an assessment at one time and the rest of it at another time. Another way that we can make an accommodation is by how we present material. And that is by, for example, presenting stuff orally, presenting it on a computer, presenting it in writing. How we allow a student to respond to questions, that could be another type of accommodation. For example, we could allow a student to respond by typing an answer. We could allow a student to respond orally. We could allow them to respond by pointing. So there are different types of response formats. And then the last major type of accommodation that we use for assessment is setting. Do we allow the student to take the assessment in an area where they're separate from other students, or that type of thing? Now, I think that a lot of times we fall into a wrong view of what the correct purpose of accommodations is. Many people demand accommodations for their child because they think it's supposed to help their child. And while accommodations might help a child to get a better test score, that's not the purpose. The purpose of accommodations actually is to help a test to do a more accurate job of measuring how well a student knows the material that you're assessing. Okay? For example, all tests have what you call a standard error of measure. In other words, it varies a little bit. Your performance on the test is going to vary a little bit based on how well you slept the night before, how well you guessed, what your stomach feels like, whether or not you're really concentrating. There can be a whole lot of little variables that affect your test performance that cause a little bit of an issue. What accommodations are an attempt to do is to remove the variability from tests that are caused by a disability. Okay? So, if we're going to use accommodations, they need to be specific for the individual student. This idea of giving double time as extended time on every subject for a student with a learning disability does not fit along with that line of removing the variability, okay? For example, a student may need time and a half for math, but they may be able to do just fine with the reading, so they don't need double time. Now, how can you tell if an accommodation is a good accommodation? If it's going to benefit the student that needs it, but not help somebody. If you give it to everybody, it's not going to benefit those that don't. Example I use in class, if I ask you to write the alphabet in 1 minute, you can do that. If I ask you to write the alphabet in 1 minute and you've got a broken hand, you can't do that. And if I'm trying to assess your knowledge of the alphabet, I need to give you extended time to do that accurately. But for somebody without a broken hand, if they can't write the 26 letters in the alphabet in a minute, they can't write it in 5 minutes either. So that's a good accommodation. Now, here's something I want to bring up. If we need to give kids accommodations in order so that the testing reflects what it is we're actually trying to measure with the test, then when we don't give kids accommodations, what we're doing is we're selectively reducing their ability to get a fair score on the test. So when we talk about these high stakes tests now, they're saying kids have to take them on computers or only certain accommodations are allowable. What we need to do is keep in mind that what we're actually doing is saying that we're going to be prejudiced. We're going to bias test scores for students who need those accommodations that are not permitted. Now, who are those students likely to be? They're likely to be students with disabilities, who are also likely to be students who are from minority backgrounds or lower socioeconomic classes. Why is this a problem? First, it's going to hinder students' opportunities to continue their education. It's going to affect funding for schools and for teachers. If teacher pay is based on student performance on tests, and we reduce the ability of kids to perform, to show their accurate skill levels on tests, then we're reducing opportunities for teachers to get pay increases, which means fewer teachers are going to want to go to that school, which affects overall quality of education in the school, and it can also affect school funding. So we need to make sure that if accommodations are needed by a student, those accommodations are appropriate for the student and what we're trying to assess. They're individualized for that student, and we need to make sure they're provided, not that they're not provided. If we can't provide a kid with accommodations on a test and that student needs those accommodations, we should not give the test, because what we're doing is giving a test that we know the results are not going to be accurate, okay? Instructional accommodations. We should always do whatever we can to help kids learn, so we should provide every instructional accommodation possible, this is my opinion, to every student, whether or not they're entitled to it or not, because the point of teaching is for students to learn, so we should make that possible. Where we should not use instructional accommodations is, for example, if we've got a child that needs to be able to learn to cross the street, we need to make sure that he's able to cross the street in the same time that's needed to do it safely. Giving him more time does not benefit him in the real world. Beyond that, we need to remember always that our goal as teachers is not to make learning difficult, it's to make learning easy. Students don't do work, their job is to have academic outcomes to achieve. So we need to always make sure that we make it as easy as possible. We call this efficiency in the business world. Make it easy for students to learn, not difficult by depriving them of ways of, enable them to be more successful. All right, if you have questions about this, a lot of this is my opinion, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this stuff. It makes sense. When you get beyond the jargon, it makes sense in the real world. So if you've got questions or if you disagree with me and want to debate it, give me a holler. Maybe you can convince me I'm wrong. I'll be open-minded, as long as you will. And we'll see what we can learn from each other. All right, have a nice day. Bye.